Hello chess friends and welcome to your out of chess channel and welcome to a very special game that I prepared for you today. It's Stockfish 15 versus Leela-0 in the Richter-Rauzer attack of the Sicilian defense, and this game is actually the reverse game of the game that we have seen a couple of days ago, in which Leela played with the white pieces against Stockfish 15 in the same line in this Richter-Rauzer attack. And this is really beautiful to see how different these two engines are, because in one particular moment the variation will change, the line will change sort of, because in one particular moment Leela-0 with the white pieces played a much more solid line, where Stockfish in the same line played simply a much more aggressive line than afterwards. So Stockfish played, I think, the more tactical way in the continuation of this sequence of the Richter-Rauzer attack. So it's really interesting to see the differences in this top engine level. So that's why probably Stockfish is the best engine in the world, because it chooses many times the more aggressive, the more tactical way. So let's see now the beauty here with the white pieces, Stockfish 15 against Leela-0 with the black pieces. So e4 was played by Stockfish. We have c5, knight to f3, d6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight to f6, knight to c3, protecting the e4 pawn, and after move knight to c6, we have reached now the classical Sicilian with 4 knights out, and now many things can happen, many sidelines can be applied by both engines. So here in the continuation we have now again the Richter-Rauzer attack with the move bishop to g5. So e6, the chevening structure, of course with ideas in the near future to break through with the move d5. So here queen to d2, play by Stockfish 15, a6, preparing this early flank attack on the queen side, because obviously with the move queen to d2, white is preparing queenside castling, so black wants to be fast and wants to attack immediately here the queen side. So now comes here queenside castling. We have now h6, and this is now the critical moment of this game, because here the difference will happen, because in the game between Leela-0 and Stockfish 15, so when Leela played with the white pieces, Leela played the more solid bishop to e3, but Stockfish played a much more aggressive line. Stockfish played a more direct line, played simply knight takes c6, b takes c6, and now bishop to f4, and this is a much more forcing line. You see now, okay, what actually Stockfish did, connected here really 3 pawns in the center of the board, actually even allowed here Leela-0 maybe to open the b file to create maybe some madness on the b file, but actually this line is much more aggressive. I think we can agree, because of the fact that Stockfish is immediately attacking the weakness on d6. And the problem for black, of course, is that you cannot push the pawn on e5. You get bishop to e5, d takes e5 is not working, you get checkmated on d8. So this is a tactical shot that you should know. So it's really hard to defend this pawn, so that's why the next move makes sense here by black. Black has to play now the move d5, but Stockfish plays now really a beautiful aggressive method against this central pawn storm that Leela-0 has here. So after move d5, you don't want to take, of course. Okay, maybe you not lose the game immediately because you took, but look at this now. After c takes d5, black is here really now fixed pawn structure. No dynamics now are in the center, and actually now these 2 pawns are annoying. They're restricting, of course, white pieces in the continuation of the game. And now rook to b8 in the near future, maybe competing first with bishop to d6 against this b8 square, then maybe trade off the bishops, getting the rook on the b file, then maybe even the queen somewhere on the b file, maybe include somehow the bishop into the game. So I would not love to play now anymore this game from white's perspective. So that's why here after move d5, Stockfish keeps the tension in the center of the board. That's very important here to say. It's not the same position if you're battling here already in the center and if you're not. So that's why here queen to e3. We have now bishop to b4 by Leela-0, and Stockfish played simply bishop to e2 with a beautiful preparation, of course, to play maybe afterwards g4, h4, maybe even g5, h5. So Stockfish is basically waiting Leela-0 to castle here kingside, and then Stockfish has already the opportunity to attack the kingside. So we have kingside immediately by Leela-0, and if you take now, for instance, bishop to c3, queen takes c3 will happen. The problem is now knight takes e4 doesn't make sense, because you didn't castle. That's the difference. And now you see the g7 pawn is weak, the rook is hanging, this pawn is weak. Maybe you can do some forks, but you lose for sure, I think, the game. So that's why it's not working here, this line for black. So after move bishop to e2, so you have to first castle in order to make maybe this tactical shot, bishop takes c3 followed with knight takes e4, because then of course the g7 pawn is protected. So here in the continuation, after move kingside castling, so Stockfish sensed that the e4 is weak, so that's why Stockfish advances. Now the pawn e5, we have knight to h7, and now knight to e4. So Stockfish gets out of this mess, doesn't want to actually give up even this knight. That's the beauty about Stockfish games. Sometimes Stockfish is not trying to simplify games, Stockfish is always trying to complicate things. So knight to e4 is complicating, of course, the position, and now there is, in the near future, maybe not immediately, but in the near future, there is also a beautiful tactical shot that could happen. A knight to f6, maybe deflecting this pawn from the defense of the h6 pawn, then bishop to h6, maybe something like queen to g3. So now you see the pawn on e5. It's really beautiful to see the pawn on the e file, the one pawn battle against this three pawns in the center of the board, and actually became the best pawn of all of them. So now the pawn on e5 really causes some positional problems in black's position. So in the continuation, we have now a5. So Stockfish probably will be challenged in the near future with the move bishop to a6, where Leela c0 will try, of course, maybe to simplify the game by trading off more pieces. We have now a3, kicking away the bishop, bishop to e7, and now immediately h4. So as I said in the beginning of the game, now maybe g4, g5 could work, maybe opening the h file. Here in white's position, I think even if you sacrifice some pawns just in order to create open files, it's perfectly fine. So you don't count pawns anymore. It's not important now to watch for your material. Here you have to even maybe sacrifice some pieces, you have to even sacrifice some rooks, pawns, it doesn't matter, you just open the files against your opponent's king. So here in the continuation, we have bishop to a6. So this is now the idea, to trade off the bishops, but again, Stockfish is not allowing. Stockfish is saying you're not simplify the game in this sequence. c4, of course, bishop to c4 is not working, bishop takes c4, the queen is hanging here on the d file. So here in the continuation, we have queen to d7, and here I ask myself the question, why is Leela staying on this damn d file? Why is Leela not getting out of the d file mess? Here, for instance, why didn't Leela play maybe a more solid queen to c7? And this move seemed to me really logic, because here, if something gets cleared maybe on the c file, then we could have maybe an open c file, and look at this, the queen is already there, could maybe attack the king on c1. But this is actually not working because of this tactical shot that I said could be possible. Look at this, knight to f6. It's really wild, because if you take now g takes f6, it is not working. Look at this, you get e takes f6, discovered the attack against the queen, and now the queen will come into the game. So it's, I think, here game over for black. So let's see different idea. Maybe you can get with your queen out here on e8, but it doesn't get better because you get this one, knight to d6, and I think you have to take out this very annoying now knight on d6. We have bishop to d6, maybe here e takes d6, and now f6 could be an opportunity maybe to break through here in the center to connect the pawns. Okay, you have several likes or weaknesses maybe, but now this central pawn storm maybe could work here in this line, but actually it's again not working because rook to e1 could happen. Look at this, you play e5, okay, we're stepping back, and what you're gonna do now, even if you play, I don't know, here maybe d4, now comes simply queen to e4. Okay, you had your fun a little bit in the center of the board, but now it's, I think, game over. f5 is not going to work anymore because you lose this one. Now in the next couple of moves, white will simply play bishop to d3, will attack the knight. So it's really unpleasant game, although black has maybe created here some kind of a madness in the center of the board, but actually this pawn storm can be stopped, so it's not such a huge positional problem here for white. So as I said, you see, queen to d7 was played by Leela c0, queen to e8, queen to c7. These moves are not working because of some other tactical possibilities here by Stockfish 15. So after move queen to d7, we have a rook to d2 by Stockfish. Stays, of course, here where already the queen is never allowing this idea bishop to c4 to trade off the life with bishop. So in the continuation, we have a4, we have bishop to h6. This was now a stunning tactic, but I think it was quite obvious that the battle will be lost somewhere around the square h6, or maybe here around the square f6. It was obvious that Stockfish will break the position in this way. Bishop to h6, really a beautiful tactical shot. So we have g takes h6, queen to h6, we have f6. The problem is now, even if you play f5, maybe this move is more solid. You're fixing the pawn structure in the center. Actually, white doesn't have to take here en passant. White should simply proceed with the normal knight to g5. The problem is now the queen is under, the knight is under fire. You now have to maybe play bishop to g5, connecting now also the queen to the knight. But now look at this, after h takes g5, the queen cannot come into the defense because you lose now this pawn. This pawn is very important, and the game is, I think, over. So for instance, if you try to cover yourself, then we have queen to f7. If you play rook to f7, look at this, g6 is the fork. If you take with the king, then of course rook to h7 is going to happen. So it's again game over here for black. So really stunning tactics. So let's go back here. After move g5, if you don't do anything, if you play something like rook to f7, if you cover, of course, if you start trying to protect your pawn on e6, then g6 is going to happen anyway, and then again it's game over. So you see, really stunning tactics the Stockfish prepared here. So that's why f6 was played by Leela0. See, f5 does make sense, but in this sequence, at least now white doesn't have any more the square g5 in order to attack the position further. So we have now rook to h3, and you know, when Stockfish creates this beautiful rook lift, that something special will happen. Now rook to g3 is the obvious threat. It's really wild how Stockfish included now more attackers into the game. So king to h8, Leela gets out of the potential range on the g file. We have rook to g3, we have rook to f7 competing now here on the square g7, and now maybe trying also to get another defender into the game by playing rook to g8. So we have now e takes f6, and here Leela0 retreated to d8. If you take now bishop to f6, this may be playable. Maybe my Stockfish engine at home showed this as a better line for black, although still white is much better. But look at this, even if that happens, knight to g5 is still working. Finally Stockfish would have occupied the square. Now bishop to g5, h takes g5, you can maybe compete here, but now again this idea g6 is going to happen, so there's nothing that can be done against this move. You can play maybe rook to f2 here in order maybe to, I don't know, create some tactical problems here on the f file. But again, g6, you can maybe try this one, queen to g7. Again, maybe black would try to simplify the game by trading off more pieces. But now queen to h4, you including maybe this other rook into the game, takes, and look at this now, rook to d4 is even working. That's the beauty about this tactical sequence. You cannot actually take because look at this, rook to h4 is even checkmate. You don't have checks here because the bishop is covering the f1 square. You could maybe try, I don't know, maybe something else. You could try maybe to include this rook into the defense, but look at this, bishop to d3 is going to happen, and now you have to again make a reaction, takes, and again it's a beautiful checkmate. So bishop to d3 is the most important attacking move now by white. So as I said, really stunning tactics. So after move e takes f6, we have seen now bishop to f6 maybe is possible, but it's not working anyway. Here bishop to d8 was played by Leela0. Now Stockfish stays with this very powerful pawn here on this side of the board. So here knight to, bishop to h5, attacking now the rook on f7. Notice that here still we have this tension on the d file. So again, you cannot take out the knight on e4. We have rook to f6, knight to f6, bishop to f6, and now bishop to g6, attacking also the knight on h7. So queen to g7. Again, Leela0 is desperately trying to simplify the game by getting rid of the queens, but now queen to h5, bishop to c4 finally was possible for Leela, but it's a little bit too slow because now comes this beautiful tactical shot. We have bishop to f7, the queen has to retreat, but now rook to g8 forces the queen to take out now the rook for two pieces for the rook and the bishop. And now after king to g8, we have this position in which, okay, Leela0 has actually three minor pieces for the queen, but the king is again exposed. So I think we have a beautiful tactical element here for Stockfish 15. So the endangered king is here perfectly fine in order to make some kind of a progress. So we have queen to g6 by Stockfish, king to h8, and now g4. This is really beautiful because now Stockfish will try again to create some madness by using this pawn. So bishop to h4, we have rook to d1, trying of course to get the rook on the h file where it's supposed to be, where it's supposed to attack again the cornered here king on h8. So rook to g8, queen to e6, so we have rook to f8, rook to h1, finally attacking the bishop. We have bishop to g5, but now rook to king to d1, getting the king towards the center. Seemed to me in the beginning a little bit weird, but still, if you try this one, then bishop to d3 will come, and maybe bishop to e4, maybe fixing the bishop here where it's a good defensive piece, where it's of course protecting the knight on h7. So this was a good move here by Stockfish. King to d1, not allowing again some annoying checks, at least not the ones that are including this bishop into the center of the board. So here bishop to d3 anyway by Leela C0, but now we have this one, queen to e5, attacking the king. King to g8 was played. If you cover yourself here with bishop to f6, this is actually not working because queen to d6 is going to happen. So we have here a double attack against the rook on f8. So now the threat is of course something like rook to h7 followed with queen to f8, or queen to f8 immediately, whatever you want to play. The pawn is hanging on c6. The bishop is a little bit loose here. It's always connected to these two pawns, so we have here too much dependency situation here by black. So the queen is centralized, the queen is attacking now many pieces. So here in the continuation, after move queen to e5, that's why king to g8 was played by Leela C0. We have rook to h7. This was a stunning new tactical shot by Stockfish 15. We have bishop to f6. So here Leela C0 is trying to stay with the pieces on the board, but look at this, what Stockfish did. Queen to h5. Okay, you have now your fun, you can take out here the rook, but look at this now, g5. We have bishop to b2, and now g6. This is really stunning tactic that Stockfish pulled off here in the continuation of the game. Now you have to take bishop to g6, queen to g6. You can cover yourself, but now this pawn is hanging, and obviously also this pawn is hanging. Here the continuation, rook to f4 was played. If you take out now the pawn immediately, okay, maybe that this was also a possibility, but now after queen to d5, king to h8, we can again try this one, and when we can play queen to a8, maybe then take out this pawn, and with this pawn, with this pass pawn on the a file, I think white should be winning. So here after move queen to c6, that's why rook to f4, queen to d5. So at least Leela C0 is trying to protect this pawn, but now Stockfish continues simply with queen to d3. We have king to g8, queen to d8, a couple of checks. We have queen to c7 attacking the rook, and now rook to d4 played by Leela C0, king to e2, and now king to g6. King to e3, getting the king closer towards the center. We have bishop to f6, queen to c6. Now the threat is of course something like queen to f6, king takes f6, and then we can take out the rook. The king will be, let's see, possible continuation. I don't know, maybe you play something like this. We can, I think, takes, and now you have this one, king to d4. The king has to be always occupied with this pawn on the f file. Meanwhile, white will simply grab this one, will play with the king somewhere on the b file, and will simply push the a pawn towards the queen, and it will be of course a completely winning game here for white. So it's also something worth to mention. This would be, as I said, a beautiful tactical shot. So that's why here rook to h4, we have f4 by Stockfish 15, rook to h3, king to e4, and now rook to h7 played by Leela C0. If you take now maybe this pawn on a3, then of course f5 is going to happen, and now the pawn is used as also beautiful attacker, so it's, I think, simply not working here for black. So as we said, after move king to e4, Leela C0 plays rook to h7 instead of rook takes a3, but now Stockfish 15 simply took the pawn here, and in this position actually Leela C0 even resigned. So too many pawns are on the board, so we have now two passers for white. The endangered king is still present here, the queen is very active, so Stockfish will just push the pawns further, and will have of course a completely endgame here. So beautiful stunning game played by Stockfish again against its arch enemy Leela C0. So as I said, it have been, I think, two great games that we have seen now by Leela C0 and Stockfish. Both of them were won by Stockfish 15 in the same opening in the Richter-Rauzer attack. So please check out also the reverse game. It was really incredible what Stockfish did also with the black pieces against Leela C0. Really mortal stuff here by the Stockfish engine. Really some great tactics all over the board. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed the game. Here's the link of our previous game, of the game between Leela and Stockfish in the Richter-Rauzer attack. And if you want to see more aggressive games like this, check out my Comments the Chess Games Played by Computer series with some more games played by Alpha 0, Leela 0, Stockfish, and many more. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.